I want to thank everybody who is watching my show, and I'm hoping everybody had a great Labor Day weekend. Today is September 7th, 2020. And first of all, let me just have a little sip here of this great Goya coconut water drink. It's really refreshing. But I want to get to I want to get into some very aspects, and it's actually where I professionally focus into mainly on my own is within the geopolitics around the world. More specifically, I'm considered an expert in Middle East affairs. Before I get into that and comparing them to both the national security and foreign policies between or actions by both Biden and Donald Trump, President Trump, I just wanted to bring out some issue that just had recently come on, two issues recently that you may have seen. Of course, that's the Nancy Pelosi. She has to have her hair done and with no mask at a single mom's hair salon, and then blames it on for being exposed for her hypocrisy, as they say, let them eat cake, according to Nancy Pelosi, where she was busted for being such a hypocrite. But this is not unique just among Nancy Pelosi. This is actually a common theme, common circumstance across a lot of the Democrats. In fact, most Democrats. I can name instances from AOC, Bernie Sanders, Biden, to Schumer. I can give you countless of hypocrisies amongst them all. And what they always do as I say, not as I do. And this gives an idea, as I discussed a couple in my last show regarding character, says a lot about their character, which I never really brought up, is about the hypocrisy they have. And ironically, I stated in the previous show about their attacks on Trump and calling for him things for actually what they're basically had accused him for, what things they actually have committed themselves, which I will get into again further down the road with some new highlighted information that's being corresponded to with the recent Durham criminal investigation and etc. But I'll get into that to another time. I also want to get into say something about which I think is absolutely disgusting, but I'm not really surprised. The recent article that came out by Atlantic with Goldberg, who is a well-known globalist. And by the way, Atlantic and the person involved with the write-up of that, or actually the lead editors, is a massive, huge, whatever you want to call it, donor of the Biden campaign. So it makes sense for Atlantic to make up some total BS and a ridiculous attack toward Trump. Basically, the Atlantic, to explain who they are, they're basically a globalist left democratic, I'll call it a rag, because that's all it is. And they know that Trump support is actually on the surge. So they made up this crap. This is just one of their many crap nonsense they'll make up, especially about about the military. Any normal person with some gray matter would come to the conclusion that this is a blunt BS political attack with no real things. Oh, yeah, they have anonymous sources, but even Bolton himself and others, categorically told how it's full of crap. But this brings into the issue of military, which I wasn't going to bring into, but it is one aspect that needs to be discussed, that what Trump has actually done for the U.S. military. It is a fact that Joe Biden have always advocated the cuts of the military. even towards the military personnel, which had effectively affected them. He drastically supported the cutting of military funding in the United States by, in fact, that diminished even our men in uniform, and diminished our men in uniform to do their duties, or let me say this, hinder their ability to do their duties. But there was another thing that Biden was always against, and this is really, really important so you understand. Joe Biden was against any raises. I repeat, Joe Biden was against any kind of raise for the military personnel, for their salaries. He was always against their raises. In fact, it was ironic that he consistently voted while he was in his 47 years of raising his salary as a senator, but he consistently, and you can look this up, advocated and voted against the raising of the salaries of our soldiers. So it's sort of ironic for him to even talk about the military, because he has actually no moral standing when he talks about the military. I mean, again, Biden was against giving our men and women a salary raise. That's a fact. He also, interesting enough, he refused to increase funding or even fixing the disgusting VA healthcare that was running through rampant, especially at its height of disgustingness, if there's such a word, for their healthcare for our men and women, and they had to endure. And it wasn't until President Trump fixed that. I mean, first of all, it was Trump who actually ended up increasing the military funding to an expansive level that had reversed what Biden and Obama had done before. But he actually also increased their salary substantially. This is due credit. You got to hand it to Donald Trump. He did this. He also did a really important thing, and I have to tell you because I have a family member who is in the U.S. Air Force actually, and I have very close friends. I'm sure you all have how bad the VA was, and Trump fixed the VA. He fixed it with the Veterans Appeal Improvement Modernization Act, and he also fixed it with the Veterans Affairs Accountability and the Whistleblower Protection Act and the Mission Act. What it did is basically create responsibility for any employee or the facility of the VA to do what they're supposed to do, take care of our veterans. And this is what Trump advocated, and this demonstrates by action, not just words, because Trump always has said how he loves the military. I mean, he goes squeamish. I'm just telling you that he goes squeamish, or even tears will roll out of his eyes seeing when our military are hurt and what they go through. As much as he's a tough guy, from very selected people have often said that he is a softie when it comes to the military, along with children, which I've stated before. So for him to say anything disparaging about our military, that's asinine. It's so absurd, it's ridiculous. So this shows you by his actions, his words, it's pretty much, and it's sort of opposite of what Biden has done for our vets. So if you have a vet in your family, and a lot of people do, think about that. All right? Who is really there taking care of the vets? And in fact, Trump had also provided in this act, which is really strategically important, not just for an accountability, but he provided an option for the vets. He gave them the ability to secure or obtain health care or healthcare providers through like a voucher program, so they can be taken care of in a timely manner if the VA wasn't there for them. Frankly enough, he just loves the military. I mean, the military loves him. This can't be said about Biden, though. I mean, Trump pretty much, and don't believe a lot of the fake polls that are put out there. Trump pretty much has about 70% plus of support from the military. And I say plus because, it just goes up. And that's also amongst the vets as well. And Biden, if he's so lucky, he would have like 30%. In fact, it's interesting enough, this is how bad Biden is with the military. He's actually lower than Obama, even on the normal polls. He has less support. So this makes you understand how pathetic and BS the Atlantic article is. I mean, you got to be really not even an anti. You got to look at. I'll give you an example. Bolton, who's no love of Trump. I mean, he's basically anti-Trumper, and he stated how basically in his own way he says things, but he said outlandishly. I mean, he not outlandishly, but clearly he stated how Atlantic story is purely bull crap. All right, so Trump, without a doubt, I can actually say is extremely high pro-military, and especially for the day-to-day soldier or the common soldier. I mean, if he had the capacity and had gone to, let's say, West Point, I don't know if he'd be a George, could be the general's common soldier, but he would probably pass for such a situation. I mean, you can characterize him at that. And you can see it, like I said, as he walks past them, you can see his face and you can see the response by the military when they see him. I mean, you can see on military when they see Donald Trump near him. And there's a reason for that. He's probably the first president in a long time that has greatly supported our military in a real way. Not, okay, I'll give you $1 billion so you can fight another war. But he looked also at their lives as well. So you're not sending them to arbitrary wars for some globalist project, like in past presidents, like Obama, Bush, Clinton in Bosnia. So I mean, there's something to be said about that. And like I said, most of them think of the military actually would, if they could speak, because they're not really supposed to speak often, but I'm telling you, they probably think that Biden and the Democrats are pretty much dangerous for our military and for America. And you can see they have treated the men and women like total crap, but not Trump, because Trump loves the military and the military loves Trump. That is like I know the sun is going to rise in the east and set in the west. That's how much when you talk about the military with Trump. Okay, there's no question. So this BS article is, pop in the toilet. I mean, that's about its worth. And anybody giving it any latitude, you got to be an absolute moron. I hate to be that candid if you believe in anything like that. So, but what I want to get into is about Biden's foreign policy and his national security, as he has failed for some 47 years. And I apologize, I need to get a little sip here. Got hooked on this Goya coconut drink since, way back when. Anyway, Biden's history is sort of interesting when you talk about national security and foreign policy, because if I did a scorecard and I had to figure out one of the worst people in the Senate who have failed and totally screwed up and didn't know what the damn hell what they're doing, and sometimes to a point of sometimes dangerous or are dangerous, which I'll get into, I'd have to say Joe Biden. Joe Biden would be the last person you want being commander-in-chief, involved with our national security and directing our foreign policy. I mean, the last person. I mean, Obama's Secretary of Defense, and I quote him here, Robert Gates, who actually served under both, by the way, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, wrote in his 2014 memoir about Biden. And this is what he said about Joe Biden. I mean, I'm just telling you, this is an example. And I think he may have, and you'll find out why he said this. Gates said that Biden has been wrong in nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. Hear that? He's been wrong nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. Now, some things I agree with Gates and some things I haven't, but he does have a clear eye on things after the past, and he's pretty straightforward on a lot of aspects. So let's look at, there was an article printed out by left-leaning Boston Herald, which is not exactly loves Donald Trump, right? Another little globalist paper. But it too acknowledged Biden's foreign policy and national security as an absolute failure. And there was an article, I believe it was on April 20th in 2019. It talks about Joe Biden's failed foreign policy record warrants closer look. Well, you don't need a closer look. I mean, you would have to be blind. But let's go down the merry-go-round, and here we go. Right? Down the yellow brick road, here we go. Joe Biden's little history. Now, I'm going to try to get this as possible, as chronologically as possible, but I'm probably not. But just bear with me, because I might be jumping all over it, but it just the way things flow. So, first of all, what happened in the 1990s? Well, in the 1990s, we had NAFTA, right? That was signed by Bill Clinton. But guess who supported it and pushed it? Joe Biden. And what did NAFTA do? It basically removed American jobs overseas to Mexico and other places, right? And our manufacturing are going out, right? Get the picture? Meaning things were leaving. This has started like a pattern with Biden, because Biden, I have stated to before, is a globalist. And what was the difference between a globalist and a nationalist? A globalist doesn't care where all the commerce goes out of the United States. It can be built in China or Vietnam or South Korea or wherever, or Europe or Mexico or Canada. They don't really care as long as they're getting their cut and they're making money off of it. That's globalists. They don't care. They don't care if there's American workers or American businessmen or American manufacturing has gone to hell. They don't care. That's a globalist, because it's globalization. That's what globalization is. Nationalists or national aspirations is dealing with America first, for example, is being built in America, made in America, American manufacturing, making sure American jobs are considered first. That's nationalist. That's what made in America. That's what making America great. It's not what they keep on saying, the liars in CNN and all those it's a racist thing. No. He's talking about making America great again, about economically. And by the way, that making America great again, that was used by Clinton before Trump. I mean, it was also used by JFK. It was also used by Reagan. So, I mean, that is not racist. It's total garbage, and you got to be a moron, and sucking down the tube of leftist globalist propaganda to even think of that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who still believe that. They'll sit there and watch MSNBC and Rachel Maddow, who's a total globalist propagandist, and others like on CNN, Lemon and others. Cuomo. I mean, I can name names. They're all globalists. They're all being utilized. They're just puppets. They're told what to do, what to say, how to say it. And they know what's up. They got the directions, and and they hid a lot of stuff, which I'm not going to get into now. But where were they? Where was CNN and Rachel Maddow during the 8 years of Obama, and where were those jobs? Where were they about NAFTA and renegotiating with Mexico and Canada to get their jobs and manufacturing back? Nowhere. Nada. Because they didn't care. They're all globalists. So basically Biden also supported another interesting thing. This is a little bit of national security. I don't know if you remember, some of the youngins probably don't remember because it's back in the 90s. How did North Korea suddenly get their nukes? Well, see, there was, first of all, President Clinton made a nuke deal. This might sound familiar with Iran, with North Korea. Kim's, by the way, his father. And Biden supported that North Korea nuke deal. And what happened? How did that turn out? Oh yeah, North Korea obtained nukes. So how did they stop them? Well, they just started giving money to North Korea, and they think anything is just money. And they threw money at North Korea, and North Korea just outmaneuvered them, outdid them, outsmarted them, took the money, and thank you very much, and we're going to go build some nukes now. What are you going to do about it? They couldn't do anything. They didn't even do any sanctions. They just cowed down. They did that, we'll just let things lie. I mean, playing the ostrich and sticking their head in the ground. Because that's Biden. That's Obama. But that's basically Biden, how he works. There's also an interesting, I know I'm going to jump back now, there's some of the trade and economic stuff. I'm going to go back and forth, and I apologize, but I just sort of have to in certain things. But Biden, you'll see why. Biden, by the way, advocated support for China for about 30 years. And this included getting China into the World Trade Organizations and other trade organizations. And without any real restrictions. There was basically bullcrap restrictions. Like basically, China was set up as a third world country, and so they gave them latitude, so they were not on equal level. And this is how moronic. Now they didn't do this being stupid. Okay, you're gonna have to think about this. They're not. Biden's not that dumb. Biden thinks about his money and his family's money. And this is how globalists think. They are thinking, okay, I'll make a deal with China and let them in, and there's money to be gained by this. And you're going to see that this is a common pattern, which I've discussed before in a past show about his corruption. But basically, he advocated the unbalanced trade with them, which basically gave in so that, they didn't even have any restrictions or created any mechanisms to prevent China from stealing any of American technology. I mean, it literally allowed China to infiltrate American schools, such as Harvard, where, by the way, recently a couple of Harvard professors were caught selling high technology and trying to communist China, in fact, undermining our national security and committing treason, etc., etc. But there's 1.5 billion reasons explains why Biden has such a deep allegiance to the Communist Chinese Party and not America, right? This is a pattern. So which you'll say, I'm going to get into with Hunter, but Biden already had his foot in the door with the Chinese well over 30 years ago. And that's when the things started happening. Going back to in the 90s now, I don't know if you all remember, but there was unrestrained bombing ventured by the Clinton administration. They started bombing the hell out of Serbia. Now, it wasn't exactly strategic bombing, okay? I'm just telling you. It was bombing of civilians. They didn't care if there were civilians or not civilians there. They arbitrarily started bombing. This happened during the 90s. And at that time, Serbia was on the thresholds of having more of a democratic republic kind of country, and instead, because of this bombing of civilians and Serbs, pissed the Serbians so much off, it drove in the extreme dictatorship of Serbia. And by the way, guess who advocated and supported that bombing of civilians and didn't even care? Biden. So you can't tell me Biden really cares about human welfare or civilians or innocent people. He doesn't. He's a selfish, I hate to say it so bluntly, but a selfish, prick. Biden sat on the foreign affairs, by the way, during the 80s. Now, I was living in the Middle East when this happened. In fact, I had a little actual view of it since being in that time. And I saw actually during and after the hundreds of our Marines, U.S. Marines, were killed in Beirut. And by the way, Biden sat on the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Senate. And what did he do after that happened? Nothing. Not a peep out of him. He didn't even push for Reagan to do something about it. He just sat back and, okay. This shows you how much he really cared about our Marines. And by the way, those hundreds of Marines were killed that day was the worst tragedy since Pearl Harbor on a military. Okay? That's a fact. So it was really a sad day. Biden also did something else pretty crazy. I mean, during the 80s, it was actually, I think it was like 82, it was beginning 80s. He actually thought he could lecture and threaten and cut off funds to Israel, to Prime Minister Menachem Begin, and Begin was advocating already in increasing building Jewish settlements and townships within Judea Samaria, also known as the West Bank. Though, and again, I'm not going to get into this now, but Israel has actually every legal right because it is their sovereignty per the treaties of Sevres and Lausanne, which actually gives Israel the borders from the Mediterranean to Jordan, so they can actually build there. So when somebody says occupied territory, that's all bull crap, and I'm not going to get into that now, but that's all bull crap. But to threaten a prime minister, well, lo and behold, I remember when he did that, he was dealing with the wrong guy. Menachem Begin, by the way, you can always read his book, really brilliant, strong, person, amazing person. He really put him his spot. And there's a famous speech, I'm not going to get into it. He really gave into, it's a famous, I'm not no shaking Jew, little guy, weak Jew kind of thing. You're not going to do anything to it. We're not afraid of you speech. And he put Biden in his spot. And Biden ran with his tail between his legs. Because him going up against Menachem Begin, you got to be kidding. That's like, I don't even know how I compare it, because Menachem Begin was a real leader, okay? One of those the famous heavy leaders, okay? He'd be like the FDR or the Truman of our day, if you want to understand where he was. He was a tough cookie. But anyway, if you ever want to read an interesting book by Menachem Begin, it's actually his autobiography. It's called The Revolt. It's just for your food for thought if you ever want to read it. It shows the background if you're interested in the Middle East and what he went through. He was head of their Gun, which is also called Lehi, and there's a lot of misinformation about him by some people, but it's interesting read just to understand the dynamics during that time. Anyway, in 2010, Barack Obama and Biden actually, and this is going during the April, you got probably remember the Arab Spring that happened starting around 2010, around that time. And it was interesting because it actually started in Tunisia, so if you know a little bit of history, well, not long history. But there's an event that happened in when Egypt, during actually April, hence the name Arab Spring, that was the overthrow of Mubarak in Egypt. And the initiation of that was orchestrated by a CIA operation called April 7th. This orchestrated the eventual overthrow, and that led to the terrorist organization, the Muslim Brotherhood, which was headed in of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, which is Morsi. And it was eventually taken over with a mob rule-like democracy. And sometimes some people still question of how that election occurred and if what votes were counted and all that stuff, because of the meddling that was occurring with the Biden and Obama administration at that time. Subsequently, after the Muslim Brotherhood with Morsi took over and removed all the democratic Republican principles within the Egyptian areas, because they got elected through a democracy and then they removed the democracy, right? Almost like sort of like Hitler did, right? They actually did pretty much the same thing. And they began what they do. They started doing the purge and going after anybody who dissented with them. And they started pushing their Islamic purity agenda with Egypt. It was very disastrous. Non-Muslim Egyptians, like the Christian Copts, were subject to extreme persecution. And then in 2013, General the Egyptian army was named by his name El-Sisi, unilaterally removed the Muslim Brotherhood with the support of the Egyptian people. So think about the Egyptian people had enough. El-Sisi saw what was going on, stepped in and removed the Muslim Brotherhood and brought normalcy and stability within Egypt. What did Biden and Obama do? Well, they cut off aid to Egypt. Great. So people just starve because you didn't like the Islamic terrorist organization called the Muslim Brotherhood running Egypt? Well, that was just one incident in the Middle East. When the people of Iran revolted, and you probably maybe recall this happened back in 2009, called the Green Revolt. What did Obama and Biden do? They didn't do a damn thing. In fact, they didn't support the people of Iran. Instead, they supported the mullahs of Iran in 2009. And where was Biden? He did the same. He remained quiet and allowed it to happen. But this is nothing new, because during the 8 years that Biden and Obama was in the head of, in the White House running things, right? Did you ever hear them say one single word about the hundreds of thousands of gay Iranians who are hung up like African Americans were done to them in the 1950s and earlier by the KKK? Biden remained quiet. He didn't say a damn thing, did he? He never has. In fact, you'll never hear a Democrat complain about the Iranians torturing and killing gay Iranians. I mean, they literally have them hung off ropes and things, and they don't say a damn thing, ever. Or what they do to women. I mean, I can go on and on about the human rights violations by the Iranian government, but not a damn word will come out of the mouths of Biden, ever. And he still, to this day, Biden has never condemned Iran, ever. Just like he doesn't condemn China. Get it? There's a lot of similarities of human rights. He doesn't care, because he doesn't care. He doesn't care about people like you think. He's a selfish prick. Now, Iraq war, remember what that happened? Guess who supported that one? Oh yeah, Biden supported sending our troops to the war in Iraq. And he said, I quote, in 2008, during this happened, I'm telling you, you're probably looking on YouTube. I think there's a speech. They tried to scrub it from YouTube. But He actually supported. He said, "I would have supported it again, even after most Americans knew it was a mistake." He supported the Iraq War, even knowing that they couldn't find any WMB and it was definitely a mistake. But there was one guy that you may know of who sits in the White House right now who was against the war from the very beginning. And that was Donald J. Trump. So, there's another thing interesting that happened during the Iraq War, because suddenly there was a massive insurgency coming from, I believe, from the western Iraq, you may have heard about. And this was happening through insurgents led by Al-Qaeda, which were undermining Iraqi stability and affecting our men and women who are stationed there and causing mass damage. So Pentagon advocated a surge, a strategic surge, to counterbalance the insurgents and end what was going on. And they did. And it created stability. And it removed the Al-Qaeda insurgency in western Iraq. Well, pretty much contained it, not completely removed it, but pretty much. Because we know what happened there. They ended up some going into Syria, but I'm not going to get into that. So, who was against the surge? Oh yeah, Biden was against the surge. In Afghanistan, that's a whole nother thing. Biden actually stated that the Taliban were not really our enemy, even though it was the Taliban that supported Al-Qaeda and bin Laden in its entirety and gave them a state before 9/11 as a staging force, and they had Al-Qaeda bases and training camps, you name it. Taliban is not our enemy. You know what else? Biden was wrong. You probably may have heard, and this is sort of not so shocking, but for me, it isn't. Biden actually opposed killing bin Laden. Yeah. He was against the assassination of Osama bin Laden. But what's really bizarre, he advocated the support of the continuation of drone strikes well within Pakistan, even though they were killing civilians and killing our own in friendly fire. And he never talked about it. I mean, totally advocated it. It was a mistake. And this, you got to realize, the military takes orders. They do what they're told. And it starts from the top. So when Obama and Biden said, hey, go use those drones and start hitting those areas, the military did what they're doing. So you can't ever blame what happened on the military. This was ordered from the top. So when those civilians were killed continuously, not once, but continuously, and didn't seize or try to be more selective, that was on Biden's hand and Obama's hands. And Biden didn't do anything. I mean, we already know that. There also was a thing that happened, in a thing called Libya. Biden, out of his globalist intervention in other countries and stuff, which actually Tulsi Gabbard, Tulsi, I probably say her last name wrong, Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, some things I agree with her, some things I don't, but I understand where she comes from. And she even brought up the point about Biden supporting our armed forces and getting into regime change, getting our troops in peril. And Biden actually supported our armed forces in Libya in a regime change that we should have never been involved with. Should have been between the Libyan people. And then after we changed it, got involved, and Gaddafi was killed, and it was suddenly Libya became sort of a quagmire. Okay, it wasn't exactly well thought out what was going to happen when Gaddafi was gone, much like what happened with Saddam Hussein, but this was even worse. Our ambassador and our State Department were attacked. We know this because it was the infamous Benghazi attack. And they, of course, lied about the incident. They said, oh, it was caused by people upset about a video. Lie. We all know that. But Biden didn't do anything about it. He didn't care. And he knew it was a lie. They blamed, like I said, the attack on a video. But it was a lie. I mean, he came out and he didn't do a damn thing about it. And we know why. Because he's a liar. They were all liars. We know that Biden, Hillary, and Obama didn't even do a thing. And just, we also know now that they had a stand-down order. And allow our Americans to get help to defend themselves. They did nothing. They allowed these Americans to be killed. And they did nothing. That's how much he cares about American soldiers or American lives. See, this is a pattern of Joe Biden. And so when I say I hate to say it, I don't know if they'll bleep this out, but he is a prick. Because he does not care about American lives. It gets to me because I know, seen things. So I know how those situations affect a lot of families. I mean, people out there go and fight wars and defend ourselves for real wars. And when they pull back for people to defend other American lives, it sort of irks me. It goes, what the hell is this? There was no greater picture. It wasn't like, oh, it was preventing a massive, like a former Soviet versus America. You were pulling the nukes. They could have gone and sent in forces and had in a heartbeat. They could have sent in a strike. Yeah, that's how good we are in military in the United States. We can get there in 2 seconds, and especially in Libya. We have we have a lot of military navy. We have a huge navy fleets floating around the Mediterranean. They can get there in a heartbeat and pinpoint strikes. But what did they do? They didn't do a thing. Because they don't care. He didn't care. And of course, we know Hillary didn't care. What are you going to do about it? Remember her famous quote? But this is, like I said, this is a pattern of Biden. He doesn't really care about American lives. He never has. He doesn't care about saving lives even in Iran, Turkey, or North Korea. When those countries and others had hostages or other American civilians who were thrown in jail for just being who they are, just being an American. What did he do? Nothing. He didn't care. They always had excuses. And you can hear this from a lot of the people who were finally released. And guess who released a lot of them? It ended up being Donald Trump, of all people. Why? Because he sees an American life being in Turkey or North Korea or wherever, or Iran. He's going to do whatever he has to get them out of there. Because he values the American life. You can't say that about Joe Biden. No way. That tells you. And if you think he cares about people here, if he doesn't care about people in prisons or in war, how the hell do you think he's going to care about people in America proper? Domestically. He's not going to care. He doesn't care. He cares about himself. Excuse me. But there's another aspect you have to realize with Obama and Biden. They're seen as pretty weak internationally. I mean, I'm going to be very candid and apologize if this excuse me, these words offend you. But I have to say categorically that he thinks, he's thought of by Iran and China and Russia, NKO, North Korea, as a punk ass bitch. Example was Putin. Putin saw how the Obama and Biden failed to stand behind their lame, weak, red line threat to Syria. So what did Putin do? What did Russia do? What did North Korea do? What did China do? What did the Muslim Brotherhood do? What did Iran do? Well, they saw them how pathetic and weak Biden and Obama are. And we witnessed it. We witnessed how American was weak at its most, while these enemies saw the weakness and took advantage, didn't we? So what happened? Biden's policies led to Russia seizing control of Crimea. What did Obama and Biden do? They couldn't do nothing. Putin knew he was a weak-ass bitch. Russia was threatening to even further, and they went into eastern Ukraine with its surrogates, or supporting militia. So what did Biden do? Instead of getting arms to Ukrainians and help defend themselves, he wouldn't give them crap. Oh yeah, we'll send you blankets. Not bullets, blankets. As if blankets are going to stop Russian-made bullets. Get it? This is Biden. This is what Gates was talking about, him being wrong for how many decades. Trump, on the other hand, and this came out, by the way, in that BS impeachment hearing, that even all their witnesses admitted, Trump gave anti-tank missiles, along with heavy military equipment arms, but not Joe Biden. Under Obama and Biden, a watch, by the way, we saw how North Korea obtained nukes. And then they began shooting little rockets. They called Rocket Man, right? Kim started sending and doing what the hell, because he knew what they going to do about it. Why was Kim doing all this stuff in North Korea? Because he saw Biden's weakness and Obama's weakness when they were negotiating with Iran in that development. There was another thing that was pretty interesting during their negotiations over the infamous nuke deal. Obama and Biden restricted the DA from going after Hezbollah, who are actively selling narcotics in the United States and actually laundering money. So think about that. Here again, Biden didn't stop the arm, the defense, the district attorney. Apologize, my cat wants to go out. Sorry about that. He wants to come in, he wants to go out. That's my cat called Jazz. Anyway, so I was saying, he basically they stopped a law enforcement organization, our DEA, from prosecuting and going after Hezbollah, who was selling narcotics that would kill Americans, and using also money that was being laundered, and who knows what happens there in the United States. They stopped that. They actually prevented it. They also did another thing. There was actually a federal judge who made rulings, and you can Google this as actual fact. Several rulings, in fact, of monies that were Iranian accounts in the United States, and those monies were to be allocated to the victims of Iranian terrorism. And the same actually happened with the PLO. There was actually a court hearing which ruled, the federal judge, and gave a settlement in a ruling that the monies for victims of terrorism by the PLO, indirectly and directly, were to be given to the victims, and Obama and Biden stopped that. They actually diverted the money, actually didn't care, I don't know how they did, because it's technically breaking the law, and nobody said anything about it. You didn't hear anything from CNN or MSNBC or any of them, right? Because they don't care. Obama and Biden walk on, they can walk on water is all they care, because they're globalists. They didn't do a thing because they don't really care about Americans too. I mean, this is money that was supposed to go back to victims, and they allowed it to go through. And then you go back to the Obama-Biden nuke deal with Iran. And how did that happen? Okay, let's see. Iran got all this money that was frozen in accounts, okay? That was that money. Okay, there's money that was frozen in accounts. you're going to hear people, oh, well, what about that cash they got? And they go, oh, no, that's from their accounts. No, it isn't. That's a big lie. There was money frozen in their accounts. Obama allowed those accounts to be released. Those monies went back to Iran. Okay? The $1.5 billion, no one knows where it came from, or even if it's that exact amount that went out there, and it was cash put on pallets, dropped off in Iran. That's a fact. We don't even know if, let's say that 1.5 billion or whatever it is, and we know it's at least $1 billion plus. If, hey, Barack, you get a 10 mil out of here. Biden, you get another few million here. Kerry, you, Marie, whatever her name, Sharaf, and all those people who are involved with that nuke deal. Do you not think that they were going to get a kick out of that money? Maybe. There's a lot of money missing out of the State Department, as if you remember. I mean, think about that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that, and this I blame on the GOP, because they themselves had a opportunity to investigate something that was really pretty clear if something was going on that wasn't kosher. That money that went to Iran. And what did Iran, by the way, do with all that money they got? They still were building nukes, because that Iranian deal, basically, they could only be inspected where the Iranians allowed them to be inspected. And by the way, guess who? I forgot. You know who negotiated the Iranian deal? The same people who negotiated the North Korean deal back in the 90s. Think about it. You got to be really stupid having the worst people who did that deal, and how did that turn out? And you're having the same people do the same stupid deal, right? So anyway, what did Iran do? Oh yeah, this whole thing created a destabilization in the Middle East. It helped them expand the hegemony. And by the way, that money that came from Iran, how much of that money came in and helped support the Iranian militias and creating IEDs and other things that actually killed other Americans? Think about that. Or other people. And supported Hezbollah and Hamas and et cetera, and the Houthi. All the terrorism in the Middle East and the destabilization. And who did the Obama and Biden screw in the whole thing? Think about this one. This is how bad Biden was. And they have to go, had great terms with people in the world. No, they didn't. Besides screwing the Israelis, they screwed the Sunni Arabs. And interesting enough, because of that, the Israelis and the Sunni Arabs were thinking, wow, we see how America is with Obama and Biden. They're really about to screw us over. So you know what? Let's go talk to other people, the other powers, maybe China, maybe Russia. Because surely you can't depend on Biden and Obama, right? You blame them? They were scared. They started, the Sunni Arab states started thinking about making their own bombs. Israelis are thinking, hell, we may have to go and do something ourselves. Because that's an existential threat. And who had to clean up this mess? In the Middle East itself. That was Trump. And by the way, he not only had to clean up the mess within Iran and straighten the relations with both the Israelis and the Sunni Arabs. I mean, he had to clean up all that stuff that went on going back since Bush. That's how bad what Trump did was a miracle. If any guy needs to get a Nobel Peace Prize, it certainly should be Trump. I mean, look at now. I mean, he in 25 years there hasn't been a peace thing done in anybody with Israelis or any of the Sunni Arabs, right? Until now with the UAE, and then now just recently, and this is reflected in Europe. I know that. But now he was the one with his team who got this Kosovo and the Serbians at peace. Think about that. If any guy needs a Nobel, it's Trump. If any guy who's deflating instability and conflicts, it's Trump. Biden's the opposite. Everywhere he goes, he causes havoc. And I just pointed it out. I mean, look what's happened in the Arab-Israeli conflict. Is right now, because of Donald Trump, it's on the path of normalization and peace. I mean, right now, we see greater stability. Trump has successfully neutralized Iran. I mean, they're contained, and they're getting more and more neutralized. So, think about that. Now, while Biden's policies also were advocating protecting the Muslim Brotherhood with its various chapters, which include Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and CARE. And by the way, it's interesting to know, CARE is a terrorist organization. It is a chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood. So when you hear Omar or Linda Sarsour, there are actually Muslim Brotherhood members. And CARE was actually ruled in the United States federal judge as a terrorist organization. CARE has been designated by the UAE as a terrorist organization. Why? Because it funnels money to terrorist organizations. Why? Because it's associated with Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS. By the way, ISIS is another chapter, right? I mean, this is what Biden is. And by the way, that's why Biden went and spoke on behalf and, went and spoke before the Muslim Brotherhood of CARE. I'm surprised they're still in the United States. Unreal. We live in I'm not even going that way. We live in a topsy-turvy world where we have a terrorist organization. I mean, I actually support the Arab American advocacy was legitimate, and they and advocated their side. But CARE is all about infiltration, which I'm not going to get into, and they're literally from the book of the Muslim Brotherhood infiltration apparatus. That is a fact, and you have to be a blind or naive not to see it or understand it. Get yourself educated. You can Google it. I can tell you plethora of material of things you can see, and you can Google beyond Google and do the research and find out how CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood and what they are actively doing around the world. They're one of the biggest problems. They've been probably one of the biggest problems since the 1920s, which I'm not going to get into. I can write a thesis about it alone. In fact, I know people who've written theses about it. So what did Trump do? He ended that stupid nuke deal. He crushed ISIS. They killed its leader, and then he killed Soleimani. We know who he is. Soleimani was the head general of the Iranian army called the Red Army, Revolutionary Army, that strategically is used for causing instability in the Middle East and around the world. They are run like a terrorist organization. They are the ones he was directly involved creating IEDs against American soldiers, and bombs and terrorism. I mean, I can get into a lot of it, but he's strategically involved with a lot of it, or was. But it was a great thing that they killed him, and it really cut the head of it literally cut the head off and decapitate Iran. Iran is not the same since losing Soleimani. As much as he was an evil genius, let me tell you that. He was brilliant, but he was extremely evil. I mean, he killed hundreds of Americans, and of course, Biden was against his assassination, as you remember. Go figure. I mean, and then let's go back to ISIS. I mean, Biden's actual failure with ISIS is well understood. I mean, we know that Obama and Biden called it the JV team when they took over in Syria and started moving, expanding their caliphate from Syria all the way to Iraq. And they didn't do anything. You didn't hear a damn word come out of Biden's mouth about the non-stop genocide and destruction by ISIS. Nothing. Oh yeah, I know why. I bet you probably heard about it too, maybe, but you probably didn't realize that Obama and Biden financed and armed ISIS. Yeah, they did. See, they took their arms from Libya, then flew them over to Jordan, and then from Jordan went into Syria. And that's how ISIS got armed. And then WikiLeaks exposed this. And you know what Biden and the Obama administration responded to that? Oops, we made a mistake. That was their oops, we made a mistake. So what did Obama do after ISIS expanded their caliphate? And what did Biden and Obama do after they expanded their caliphate? They did nothing. Nothing. What did they do when ISIS is on a going upheaval in Syria and Iraq, killing and slaughtering? I mean, it was basically genocide of the Yazidi people, Iraqi Christians, Syrian Christians, and they were fleeing like in mass scale. And by the way, when they were real refugees, real political refugees, not that bull crap that was trying to come up through the southern border. Those aren't refugees. Those are people wanting to come to the U.S. because it's economics. I'm talking about political refugees who are being killed because of their religion or ethnicity or whatever on genocide. That's the Yazidis, the Iraqi Christians, the Syrian Christians that are being slaughtered left and right by ISIS, or even a lot of Sunnis and Kurds. And what did Biden do about these atrocities, this genocide? Not a damn thing. He didn't even help the Kurds in fighting against ISIS. Actually, it was Israelis that came in and sent some arms and had some, and initially, and that started keeping them defended. That's why ISIS sort of got slowed down. It was because of the Israelis. But when it significantly got destroyed, you got to hand it 100% to Trump. They strategically worked with the Kurds and moved down with our troops, and thank God we have such great troops. They destroyed ISIS really quickly too. That says a lot about Trump, right? But not much about Biden. I mean, Biden didn't do nothing about human trafficking either, or the sex trade. I mean, he didn't even care about the sex slavery that was going on with ISIS, let alone around the world, let alone around the U.S. And by the way, you know who is stopping the human trafficking and going after them in the sex trade? Oh yeah, Donald Trump. You don't hear that on CNN. I mean, just recently, I know this is getting off a little slightly off, but I think it's important to understand. It is happening worldwide due to him because of his task force that he created and implemented. They seized and freed. They seized a bunch of traffickers in, I believe it was Georgia, now recently in Ohio, and then I just heard in Indiana. That's Donald Trump freeing all these kids from being trafficked through as sex slaves. Do you think Biden would care? Hell no. He never did. And going on to the economics of Biden, he actually sort of supported TTP, which would have been basically a NAFTA 2.0, but this time in Europe. Which you think there would not be as bad as industry in America as it was after NAFTA or during the Obama years. I already spoke about how he would taxes and everything he was going to go increase that would affect probably anywhere from $4 to $10 trillion in the United States, making everybody have raise their taxes by everyone. Probably about 87% would be affected drastically, losing jobs and left and right. But he would also decimate jobs in manufacturing, just let alone by the TTP, because he said he was going to put that back. He said it. That's even Bernie Sanders was against the TPP. That's how bad Biden is. Why? Because TTP is a globalist. It's another globalist thing. We'll do trade with Europe, and they'll have we'll give them a better deal. That's what TTP was. Is basically allowing the EU to have a better trade than we did. So basically, they could trade more stuff to the U.S., but we would be barred or limited based on the terms. And you can look it up. Affect us. I mean, basically, Biden doesn't care about American economics. He doesn't care about American lives, honestly. And he's one of the worst people when it comes to foreign policy and national security. Biden didn't give a crap about NATO. I mean, he didn't pressure NATO to pay its fair share. And where was Biden in the UN with all the countries, including China, violating human rights? Where was Biden with Russia? Oh yeah, I forgot. He got his cut out of the Uranium One deal. Remember that deal that Putin got 20% of our uranium? And where was Biden under his watch when Russia was, oh yeah, meddling in our elections? Remember, he was vice president when supposedly Russia was meddling in our elections. Oh yeah, I forgot. The meddling was the Steele dossier that came from Russia that was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democrats and the DNC. But then it was used in the FISA court to spy on Trump. I forgot about that. I mean, Biden basically colluded with American enemies in an attempt to coup in our own country by using that dossier. Think about that. I mean, if you think of Biden, if you ever read the Federalist Papers, there's a lot of discussions that both Madison and Hamilton discussed, and they warned us about American politicians so corrupt to the core that they would sell American interests for the sake of their own pockets. China, 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 Iran, 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 Ukraine, 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 China, China, China. You think I'm kidding? Well, let me put it this way. I already told you about there was a $1.5 billion that went to Hunter Biden, to his company after that recent thing in a prior show. But there's more to that. You see, the Bidens made a lot, continue making money in different other venues too. See, I'm not talking about Chinese businesses, by the way, because their Chinese businesses are Chinese government. And this actually happened with like Joe Biden, by the way, who was the point person for Obama within China policy. So he was sit there in the driver's seat, ready. Oh boy, can I get some money from my family and we can really make a good deal, huh? That was Biden. I mean, it's pretty corrupt, but the corruption that he committed was so dangerous. It's not just making money. Basically, Hunter Biden was in a business partnership, and this business partnership was he was sitting as he was actually on. I'm telling you, Biden himself was on the board of directors of the Chinese investment firm called BHR. I repeat, Hunter Biden was on the board of directors for the Chinese investment firm called BHR. And by the way, BHR, that Chinese investment firm, it's owned and run by Communist Chinese military. That's a fact. And why would they put Biden's son on there? Well, I guess you didn't know what that company does. It's a company that is benefits used by the Chinese military, and it has an investment factor called the China General Nuclear activities, and they're in charge for trying to steal nuclear secrets from the United States, and they actually were charged by the FBI members of, and who is sitting on that board is none other than Hunter Biden. Yeah, that's a fact. I mean, the company basically was being used and they're using the Bidens to, while they're thinking they're making money, it was basically for a military purpose to infiltrate our security, because they were trying to get our tactical systems. I mean, this is just treason. This is like out of that TV show. If you ever watch The Americans, it's almost like out of the KGB. The Chinese were actively trying to go after, and I don't blame them, trying to get American technology for their military systems and things. And who do they use? They use Biden, of all people. Biden is their chump. This is so dangerous. This is more dangerous than any. It's okay. There's corruption with Ukraine, right? But this is worse. This is actually being involved with military secrets being transferred and stolen. Think about that. And I'm surprised that the FBI hasn't fully investigated this. Oh, why? Because he's a Biden? Because it's politics? Please. I'm just telling you, you have to look into this. There's many books and information written about this that it'd boggle your mind if you found out. There's a book by Peter Schweitzer. I can't remember the name of it. It just recently came out. You probably Google it. It goes into some of this, and he gets into some facts based upon real stuff. There's some real serious national security risks. I can't understand if Biden has if he's allowed to look at confidential and any classified material in the United States. It'd be my eyes would pop out. Okay. Because this guy is basically, him and his family are acting as enemy agents of the United States. I'm being that much. If this is true, but it's so far, I'm looking at the facts, and they're all pointed. This isn't just smoke where there's fire, there's smoke, right? Or smoke where there's smoke, there's fire. This is a pattern, and I can see they own him. I'm wondering what else they have on. They may, they always accuse Trump being beholden to Putin. But now that I think about it, we know that Putin knew a lot of stuff. But I don't think China is actually the greatest enemy. I think that China actually has the goods on Biden. I'm telling you. This is what's scary and dangerous. If he became, just think about it, he would be a president that literally, it's not a puppet by the left that everybody's thinking about. It's not just the left or the globalists. Even more, just as dangerous, or probably more so, is China is like this with him. He's like their little puppet. They must have something on him. They own by money. They pay him off. He's basically what what they would call in intelligence arenas. They'd call him an asset. Basically, he's a Chinese asset. So while Biden is enthusiastically wanting to decimate the American worker and the American businesses for his own globalist agenda, and possibly being owned, as I said, by China. I mean, just think about China, Europe, EU, NAFTA, TTP, etc. And we see the complete difference with Trump. We saw that Trump initiated the America First, not as a slogan. He makes this is a slogan, but it's more than a slogan. He actually is implementing it. Promises made, promises kept. That's not just a slogan. He's actually done it, which I said in my last show. I mean, what did he do? He made the trade deal with Japan. He negotiated with Mexico and Canada. He made deals with the EU, the UK. He definitely tried to make some moves with and then there's South Korea. He made the trade deal with South Korea, and I believe Vietnam too. And he's made better relations with South America, and he's done trade deals and working with India. I mean, think about that. And then you think the deals that he's doing with the Sunni Arabs, how we're in a better situation, and the Israelis. Our greatest asset, I don't like to use the word asset. They're our greatest friend in the Middle East. They have been, and they always will be. I mean, I'm just saying, Gates and even the Boston Herald are right. Biden was wrong for 47 years and going wrong on national security, foreign policy. But Biden wasn't just wrong. He's a danger, not just to the world, but to our nation. I mean, Trump, honestly, he ended up cleaning up the mess. The Clinton mess, the Bush Jr. mess, the Obama-Biden mess throughout the world. Biden was I mean, let me say something. Trump had some interesting advice. When people don't realize, when shortly after he won the election, he was approached by somebody, probably one of our greatest Secretary of States and geopolitical advisors in our nation history. He was formerly a globalist, but now he's actually completely reversed. He's an anti-globalist, and I'm talking about Dr. Henry Kissinger. And I've read his book called World Order, and it's a fascinating book. He even explains what a mistake that was. He looks at things not as world order, but as stability now. And he emphasizes going back to the Westphalian, I'm pronouncing it wrong. It's basically during a famous peace accord that happened back in the 1600s. But basically, he's advocating nation-state mutual recognition, meaning not globalism, but instead, there's America has its interest, Mexico has interest. Well, we know we each have. Well, let's just make a deal. Instead of destroying our borders, advocating just totally open trade without any things, no balance, you can screw me as much as you want. No, that's not what he's advocating anymore. Another person who was pretty interesting that helped also, now that was Kissinger advocated and helped great advice to, I believe, to Trump, was another guy, and his name is Pompeo. And people don't realize he was actually in the military. He was actually military intelligence. He was a military intelligence officer, and then of course he was head of the CIA, and then he's the Secretary of State right now. Another interesting person is Nikki Haley, our former ambassador of the UN, and of course there's Jared Kushner and Ivanka. And both of them, and there's many greats that go on and on, among Trump's national security team. And of course there's the DNI and former ambassador of Germany, Robert Bernal. I mean, I can go on and on. There's so many, they have such great teams that took a little while to go through the motions of clearing out some of the globalists within their government, within the administration, and who are trying to develop both stability around the world and the region, at the same time administering American First policy, where Americans' interests lie first. But they had to clean up all of Biden's mess. I mean, I'm telling you. I mean, you look at they've done. I've told you about the terrorist attacks by Al-Qaeda and ISIS in the past 2 years. Do you hear any, by the way? No, you haven't heard a damn one. Nothing. Why? It's all quiet. And as I said, just recently, Trump just created the Muslim, the Muslim Kosovo and the Serbian peace agreement, which both, by the way, are now both countries advocating moving their embassy to Jerusalem. It was also Donald Trump who moved our embassy to Jerusalem, and formally recognizing and rightfully recognizing Israel's eternal capital. Trump also recognized the Golan Heights as Israel's sovereign, and recognized Israel's sovereign rights to Judea and Samaria, but while allowing for a creative arena to develop peace and prosperity throughout the Middle East, which Arabs are recognizing. Maybe you haven't recognized it in America, but I'm telling you, the Arabs and the Jews and those living in the Middle East recognize it. They love them for it. Think about, I got to tell you one thing, including the leftists in Israel. You got to think about this. Trump approval rating is over 80%. That includes the left in Israel. That's how much Trump has done for Israel. And if you go amongst the Arabs, it's not that far. I'm not going to go into the Palestinians, because the Palestinians don't even like the PLO, and I'm not even go in there because there's a lot of stuff. But the Arabs see it. There's stability. And they see out the world, and you can see the ramifications. See, Trump recognized peace and prosperity is a goal for the world, but also in the U.S. And that's why he advocates, like you hear about law and order and prosperity, peace and prosperity. They all are the same. But the things that happen around the world, you may not think that affect you, but they do. Everything that happens in the world, including the Middle East, affects you. Oil, trade, energy. Things can happen around the Middle East, and you can see markets change and fluctuate. As Kissinger had once said, everything in the world is connected in one form or another to us in the world. And Kissinger is right. I have to say one thing. I've watched Trump, and I've always known that he's very, very brilliant, and he's very brilliant as a chess master. And I also thank God that he's our president. And I said, no wonder why the Middle East peoples, both Jews and Muslims, love him. And I also see how Asians love him. And the African nations, they love him. Why? Because he's pragmatic. He sees both sides, and he tries to create an arena of peace and prosperity, while at the same time making sure that Americans are first in that order. So it's Americans first, then the world in that order. He has achieved it and will continue to achieve it. And Biden, on the other hand, is a hate monger. He's brought dark abyss. He's been a total screw up. That's why his screw ups and his crap that he's done is basically very devilish like. I mean, like I just said about China. He's still China's bitch. Plain and simple. He's a danger. You think there would be stability in the Middle East if Biden was president? Do you think there would be? What do you think the North Koreans would do? What do you think China would do? What do you think Putin would do? He'd be a joke, and we as Americans would suffer. The world would suffer. That's the truth. That's how we're all connected. Let me ask you. You know, when you can see how Trump really cared. And he cares about children and children in the world. And this is acknowledged by many witnesses, by the way, that he went teary-eyed. He literally cried when he saw the pictures of Syrian children that were killed by chemical bombs. Not one witness saw that. Not two, several. I mean, the media tries to dehumanize him and nothing, but that guy is a real person. He has kids. And he really cares about kids. He didn't need this job to be yelled at, cussed at, ridiculed at, lied about, investigated at, going after his companies and things like that. And actually, oh yeah, he's taking a hit. He's the first president, probably, first person who became president actually is worth less on paper than anybody. He's losing money as president. And then he's the only president that he doesn't take his salary. He takes his entire salary and donates it. But he was teary-eyed when he saw those pictures of those Syrian kids. That says a lot. Like I said, he sent out an international task force to go after this child sex slavers, while Biden, on the other hand, turned a blind eye. So while Biden, or I should say China Joe, for a good reason, is another story. You have to think about why even intelligence has reported that China is definitely going to try to meddle in our elections. They're more of a danger and threat to our elections than Russia ever could be. And guess who China supports? Biden. And why wouldn't they? They're his bitch. They own him. Biden would not be the president of the United States if, God forbid, he was ever elected. He would be China's president, China's proxy, China's punk-ass bitch. Can't be that much pointed. And I got 1.5 billion bucks that says it. Right, Hunter? You know it, and I know it. Biden is the very reason that Trump was elected. The 47 years of destitute and what he's advocated, the hate, and things that he's done, not just domestically, but internationally and in national affairs. Biden is the reason Trump was elected. But also the reason the people of the world love Trump more than the media really says. And they know it. So you can't believe those fake polls or fake news. We all know it's all bull crap. Most of them I could click on it and can tell you that's globalists in a heartbeat. Because their avenue is just propaganda to basically introduce people into thinking one way or another. They even admit it. The media is going to just indoctrinate people to think one way or another against Trump. Because their aim ain't about the facts. Their aim is just to sway. The CNN is full of crap. MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, New York Times, Huffington Post, Washington Post, LA Times. They're all full of crap. If you read them and honestly that's news, man, you're living in another world because they're no longer news. They haven't been news in 20, 30 years. And people are waking up to that. Maybe it's the red pill. You wake up to the real fact. The fact is, Trump is a real world leader. But he's also the first as an American. He's an American leader and an American president. You can't say that about Joe Biden. I want to thank you for all listening. God bless you. And have a great, great day. Thank you.